A wise man once said, "I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse." You know what that meant, don't you? Agree to the offer or die. It's a line actually taken from the movie The Godfather, spoken by the fictional mob boss Vito Corleone. It might have been a made-up line, but make no mistake, the mafia have made many people offers they can't refuse. This organized crime syndicate born in Sicily, Italy, was relentless. At times, those mobsters could be cruel, brutal. So at home with violence and killing, you might think the majority of the members had a bad case of psychopathy. Today, we'll show you just how brutal those people were. And perhaps at the end, you can tell us if you think you have what it takes to be part of the Italian-American Mafia. Killing the killer of all killers. We'll start with what you might call the typical hit. The man who got taken out was actually one of the most feared members ever in the Italian Mafia. He killed maybe thousands of people according to the FBI, which would make him one of the deadliest mobsters of all time. We should say that some people think thousands is an exaggeration, but let's just say he didn't shy away from an assassination. His name was Albert Anastasia, and although he might have had quite a beautiful surname, on the street he was sometimes called the Mad Hatter or the Lord High Executioner due to his murderous temper and remarkable body count. He became one of the bosses in a contract-killing outfit we mentioned in our last Mafia show. That outfit was simply called Murder Inc., so you couldn't say there was much confusion regarding what their line of business was. After the Gambino family boss was murdered, this guy Anastasia became a boss himself. It's widely believed that he actually ordered the hit. But you've all heard that expression, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And the Mad Hatter didn't just lose the crown, but he almost lost his head. In October of 1957, he went to get a haircut and a shave, and it didn't end well. Men walked into the barber's and opened fire while he was in a chair. He then jumped from the chair and went for the men, but they just kept firing until his body was riddled with bullets. You can actually see the aftermath photo online. A certified psycho. If you've seen that photo we just talked about, the one taken after the murder of mob boss Carmine Galante is far worse. The body looks like it's been clawed at by zombies. When alive, he was described as having dead eyes, of being so cold you could barely look at him. In fact, one of the detectives that investigated mafia bosses once said the only mobster ever to scare him was this guy. With good reason too, because he felt not even a pang of guilt hurting or killing people. In fact, he enjoyed it. When he was in prison in 1931, a psychologist diagnosed him with having psychopathic personality disorder, so that explains a lot. Standing at just 5 feet 5 inches, he might have also had little man syndrome. In 1974, after a boss was sent to prison, Galante became the boss himself. The thing was, this wasn't approved by the round table of bosses called the Commission. They took umbrage with the guy just planting himself in the big chair and weren't too keen on him trying to control the business of narcotics and not sharing the winnings with the 5 families. Suffice to say, when you rankle the bosses, there is usually a debt to pay. That debt is usually your life. In 1979, Galante was having a bite to eat at a place called Joe and Mary's Italian-American restaurant in Brooklyn. He didn't finish that meal and was gunned down. If you look closely at the aftermath photo, you can see a cigar in his mouth. That was put there by the killers. The reason was Galante loved his cigars, and as we said in our last Mafia show, murderous mobsters would often do something to the corpse in some way to make a point. In this case, here's your last smoke, Carmine. Let this be a warning to anyone else getting on the wrong side of that commission. Citizen sleuth. There's a saying that crime doesn't pay, but being a good citizen and telling on criminals doesn't usually pay either. We will explain. There was a man called Willie Sutton, who was actually one of America's most prolific bank robbers over a 40-year period. He spent much of his life imprisoned, but he managed to escape 3 times. One time he was locked up because a salesman called Arnold Schuster spotted him on a subway train in New York in 1952. He was sure that he'd seen the face before, and so he followed him, realizing it was the infamous bank robber. He called the cops and Sutton was arrested. What does this have to do with the mafia? Sutton was Irish-American after all. Well, as the story goes, Mr. Schuster got his 5 minutes of fame for his good deed, appearing on lots of TV shows and doing interviews. He was a working-class American hero helping to take down one of the bad guys. Okay, so you remember the man called the Mad Hatter? Understandably, the Mad Hatter didn't much like good citizens, and one day he was watching TV when he saw Schuster. He then saw him again and again. It bugged him how much the public loved this man. Allegedly, he said to his friend, "I can't stand squealers, hit that guy." Not long after, and Schuster was found outside his home on the floor. He'd been shot twice in the groin and once in each of his eyes. That's more mafia symbolism for you. It turned out that the killer was a mobster called Frederick Angel of Death Tenuto, and he had once escaped from prison with Sutton. But years later, during another court hearing, another mafia boss said the order to kill Schuster was given by Albert the Mad Hatter Anastasia. Tenuto was also later presumed killed after he went missing, but we don't know why. It's happening today, too. Before you start to think the mafia is old news and this kind of thing doesn't happen these days, listen to this. In 2019, a mafia boss called Frank Cali was gunned down right outside his house in New York. This might not have happened for a while, but when a boss gets hit, it usually means one thing: war. You can't take out a boss without someone getting upset, and analysts fear that the killing of Mr. Cali could be the start of a feud. According to those analysts, the mafia is alive and well, and business is still going on, though perhaps not booming, and they try very hard these days to stay away from the spotlight. That means no flashy-looking guys walking into clubs with a cigar in their mouth, looking like they own the place, or at least they'll have the power to burn down the place if they feel like it. They still have rackets, they still traffic humans, guns, drugs, and they still have their fingers in a lot of underground pies. As one analyst put it like this, the economy is bigger now, there's more to be had, the pie is bigger. Now apparently the mafia work with the Mexican drug cartels, having become part of a massive distribution network that floods the world with drugs. That analyst said if you're buying drugs in Europe, it could have been the American mafia that got them there for you. We just don't hear the word mafia much these days. Entertaining Capone. The mafia boss called Al Capone needs no introduction because he's probably the most famous Italian-American mobster of all time. The man, sometimes called Scarface, is a difficult character to pin down. Sometimes he could show he had a heart of gold, and other times he was incredibly ruthless. This story is about a comedian and singer called Joe E. Louis. He wooed the crowds at Chicago's famous Green Mill nightclub, a club that was partly owned by Capone's lieutenant, Jack Machine Gun McGurn. Because of this, it was famous for being a mobster hangout. Capone had his own booth there. The thing is, when you kind of work for a mob-run club, you don't stop working until they allow you to. When you've been made an offer you can't refuse, you really can't refuse. This was the problem with Louis. When his contract with the Green Mill was about to end, he thought he could just go work for another club called the New Rendezvous Cafe. Well, he was given a stern warning from McGurn that taking that job would lead to blood and tears. The New Rendezvous Cafe was partly owned by another outfit, so losing one of his best entertainers to another mob kind of irked McGurn. To say the least, he wasn't keen on the idea of Louis switching jobs. Louis took the job anyway. In 1927, he was attacked in the hotel and his throat was sliced the whole way around and tongue severed. He was then left for dead, but somehow he didn't bleed out and was taken to the hospital. It took many years of therapy for him to be able to talk right again, and when he could talk, he had a deep, croaky voice. After that, he became even more popular as a comedian and even got into the movies. Word on the street was that Capone never wanted that excessive hit, even though he wanted to keep Louis at his club. It was Jack McGurn that went over the top, and Capone compensated Louis with $10,000. That's about $150,000 in today's cash. Capone didn't do anything to McGurn though. Louis wasn't that important. McGurn gets his too. If you learn anything about the mafia when reading the stories, is that violence begets violence, and the vicious blood-soaked circle just keeps turning. As we said, Jack McGurn was Capone's right-hand man. He played an important part in the outfit when Capone was filling his pockets with gold during the Prohibition days. But as we've demonstrated, Jack had a bit of a bad temper. He had a pretty rough upbringing, being a boxer and also allegedly taking out the killers who had assassinated his own father. Violence begets violence, you see. It's also said McGurn could have been one of the orchestrators of the St. Valentine's Day massacre, but that's not been proven. He was a wanted man, and when law enforcement put together their famous public enemies list, he was the fourth guy on the list. But life didn't end well for him, and at some point he was abandoned by the mob and left totally broke. In February 1936, the day after the 6th anniversary of the St. Valentine's Day massacre, he went bowling for his last time. He was gunned down by 3 masked men. They left a little poem next to his body. It read, You've lost your job, you've lost your dough, your jewels and cars and handsome houses. But things could still be worse, you know. At least you haven't lost your trousers. This kind of exemplifies just how cold these guys could be, but we guess you could say they were creative. No one really knows who killed him, but a lot of speculation led it to being other mobsters who didn't like the fact that McGurn bragged a lot about the business and so was a liability. It might not have been the Italian mafia though, and could have just been someone from the Irish-American mob. Payback, perhaps, just as McGurn had avenged his father. A hands-off kind of murder. We expect many of you have heard of the movie Donnie Brasco, which tells the true story of how an FBI agent managed to get in with a mafia crew run by Dominic Sonny Black Napolitano by pretending to be a crook himself. For years, that agent gave a lot of evidence to the FBI, but in time the FBI would reveal to Napolitano that he had an agent in his crew for years. The operation ended because the agent had been ordered to do a hit, and that was a bridge too far for the FBI. They told him the truth will come out, and so the best thing to do would be to go into the witness protection program. This was not what Napolitano wanted to do, being renowned as a proud and ruthless executioner feared by many. The agent once said about him, he was a vicious killer. He would kill anybody in a heartbeat if you crossed him. Despite that, the agent and him actually got along really well. In fact, it came out that Napolitano was okay with what he knew would happen, saying he had no bad feelings about the agent. All in a day's work. That's how it went. The mafia bosses were of course quite peeved with him for not discovering that he'd had a cop on his team for 6 years. On August 17, 1981, Napolitano was asked to come to a meeting. It would take place in a basement, and we all know what happens in the basements of Italian-American mobsters. Not much laundry and DIY, that's for sure. He was well aware he was going to be killed, and so he gave his jewelry and his apartment keys to his favorite bartender. He told that man, "Please take care of my pigeons." Apparently, he loved those birds. When he got to the basement, a bunch of mobsters did the deed. As for the birds, witnesses said the day after the mobster went missing, someone got rid of them. A mob boss later said he died like a man. When his body was much later discovered, it was found that the hands had been cut off. In a mafia court case, it was later revealed that this was a warning to any other mob boss that when you invite a man into your crew, you should always be properly introduced by someone else. Don't shake hands with just anyone. As for the agent, when he found out about the hit, he said, "My intention in all of this was to put people in jail, not get them killed." So do you think you would have liked to be in the Italian-American Mafia? Tell us in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video, Most Horrific Crimes, the Italian Mafia Part 1. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.